Hello everyone, you're welcome to this news hour. I am Babli Jonathan, and our top stories in this edition of the 6 p.m. primetime newscast on Equinoxe television. Insecurity hinders several pupils from taking part in this year's session of the Common Entrance Examination. Ghost Town and other challenges made it quite difficult for the pupils in the northwest and southwest regions of the country to take part in the Common Entrance Examination. We'll be bringing to you details in this edition of the news on Equinoxe television. And elsewhere, the civil society is calling on government authorities to take tougher measures and actions to stop violence in schools across the Republic of Cameroon. And they are making this call at a time police officers have been taking actions, and we're going to see just what they have been doing to stop violence in the academic milieu in the Republic. Out of the country, the new Prime Minister of France, Elisabeth Borne, comes under pressure from environmentalists from the left. They're warning that she may not be able to take drastic measures to reduce the country's carbon emissions and solve problems of inflation and low purchasing power of citizens. Stay with us. We begin this report on the campus of schools in the Republic of Cameroon, where violence has been on the rise. Students using objects to stab or kill other students. And we're going to see what the police has been doing so far to limit violence. Why not eradicate violence in schools across the Republic? In this report compiled for us by Innocent Aze.
Security forces in Yaoundé say enough is enough to rising violence in the school milieu. They are heading to schools like Government High School Angissa for a surprise search of students' bags. Their mission is to confiscate hard drugs, deadly objects, and whisk any suspect to the station for questioning. In the classrooms, suspicious substances and items are found in the school bags of some students. The female student is found with these. She says it is coffee that helps her from sleeping. Another student has in her school bag an outing dress. All of these students caught red-handed tried giving justifications that can only be paid to listening ears at the police station in the presence of their parents. At the esplanades of the unit for the security of schools and universities at Carrefour Wada, the fruits of the operation displayed to the public are abundant and from students in several schools stormed. Once we have a tip-off of any form of threat in a school, we immediately answer present and begin a search in classrooms.
Nous menons des fouilles dans les salles de classe. Parfois, ce qu'on a saisi, on a trouvé chez les dealers.
Police Commissioner Fritz Mafani, who is managing this police unit, says they won't relent efforts in fighting to eradicate violence in schools, fish out recalcitrant students, and orientate them to the right path. We don't send them to the courts immediately. We first take them to the central hospital where they are tested for drug addiction. If positive, the doctors proceed with treatment and prescriptions, which will follow up and give advice to abstain from drug consumption. It is believed the rise of violence in schools would have been alarming without the existence of these police units.
À notre arrivée, on a trouvé que la violence était très...
According to the school authority, actions brought to stop drug consumption, violence in the school milieu have yielded applaudable fruits.
En essayant d'infiltrer le milieu et de prendre beaucoup.
Many school authorities, parents and guardians expect the security forces to chase out the demon from the school milieu.
And civil society and education is civil society leaders and educationists are urging government to take tougher measures and actions like these to limit violence in schools across the Republic, according to a civil society leader and educationist Fege Titanjo. The education authorities have failed to do what they were supposed to do, and that is why violence has been on the rise in schools across the country. And he thinks that teachers are not also well trained to handle agitating students. And of course, another portion of the blame goes to parents, who he thinks have equally failed in some of the things that they ought to do to ensure that their children are well behaved. Take a listen to Titanjo.
The government has failed. When you look at the violence in school today, the first person I blame is the government. The government policies are shambolic. They have totally failed us. When you look at this violence in school, it is promoted by drug, because there is so much drug abuse in our schools today. Where do the students get the drugs? They get it from the street corners, and the police, the gendarmes, know the suppliers of this drug, but they are business partners. They collect bribes and allow drugs to come into the country. The gendarmes collect money from drug suppliers, and the drug suppliers carry out their business freely. And when these children buy these drugs from the suppliers, they bring it to school, they consume, and they become violent. If these drug suppliers were not allowed to operate freely in our communities, the intake of drug among students will reduce and violence in school will reduce. So the government has to fight against these drug suppliers. Parenting has also caused problem of violence in school, because parents are today so busy. They return late from work, go to bed, they don't check their children assignment, homework, they don't follow up, they don't dialogue with their children. The children develop so many bad habits that the parents are not even aware of. I'll bet you many of these parents are shocked when they hear that their child has been so violent onto they have stabbed somebody, because they do not see it coming. Now, we also blame teachers, because some teachers are really poorly trained. When they come across an agitated student, instead escalate the situation, which provoke the students to become more violent. So I'm begging on the government to organize seminars and do better training for teachers to help them to be able to handle agitated students, not to escalate, but to de-escalate the situation. I think this is going to reduce the killings in schools and the tension.
Several pupils were unable to take part in this year's session of the Common Entrance examination in the crisis-stricken northwest and southwest regions of the Republic of Cameroon because of insecurity. In the report coming up next, Immaculate Fogwe takes us to Kumba in the Meme Division and Bamenda in the northwest region, Kumba in the Meme Division, southwest region of the country, and the northwest region of Chief Town Bamenda. We're going to see how the Common Entrance examination unfolded there.
Insecurity in the town of Kumba, Meme Division of the Southwest region, accounts for the absence of 10 pupils in an examination center. In order not to attract the attention of separatist fighters while heading to the centers, these students had to wear assorted attires to write their common entrance examination.
I'm congratulating the teachers and the parents that have taken the bold step to let us teach their children here in Kumba due to the crisis. This morning, up to 10 children cannot leave Mato and get to Kumba. They cannot write equally in Mato due to the crisis. So they have missed the common entrance.
Due to the ghost town imposed in the two English-speaking regions, pupils could not easily access vehicles, forcing them to trek for long distances.
We started on time, no doubt, but the children had to do some sacrifices because they left their homes so early as 4 a.m. to trek to this writing ground.
Despite the hurdles faced, the common entrance examination was written hitch-free in centers in Kumba.
The government common entrance into secondary school and technical schools going on. We started by receiving the children as early as 6:30, parents brought their children and we all lined out in front of the building, and we had to begin with roll call. We sent the children later on into the hall, and at 8 o'clock we started with the exams.
The Northwest region was equally not spared from the security threats. The ever-busy Upstation Road is now deserted due to the ghost town imposed. Some parents had to move alongside their children a day before the exams to live around examination centers in Upstation. As the students were writing their exams, their parents waited for them patiently in order to take them back home at the end of the session.
In Limbe, southwest region of the Republic of Cameroon, the unstable security situation prevailing across Anglophone Cameroon compelled education authorities to take special measures to ensure the security of the pupils who took part in the common entrance examination. Several centers were relocated as a result of insecurity. We have details with our correspondent Davidson Maimo in this report.
The rush was inevitable, as most of the parents played the ostrich due to rumors of threat from some Anglophone separatist quarters, calling for a lockdown ahead of Cameroon National Day celebrations May 20th. Mboa Martin Elobe is Inspector of Basic Education for Limbe 1 Subdivision.
There was a bit of fear with the threats and boycotts that they gave, but God willing, everything is well.
Securing the people is top priority, as defense and security elements were placed in each center, and some centers relocated to more secured areas.
Like Bonadikombo, they are writing at here at APF my one. These centers now, for security purposes, had been relocated to other areas where there is more security, there is no fear, there is guarantee.
The parents say the joy of seeing a child writing the very first public examination worth sacrificing the whole day as a security guard.
Yes, they are children, they are kids, so we need to sacrifice for them. I'll stay here because it's not really okay, so we'll be here.
Okay.
Waiting for them to finish, take them back home.
So, we don't want anything to touch our arm and our children, but you know.
We are here to protect them, to make sure that in case of anything, take them home. That's the work for today.
Okay.
I wish things could be age-free the way they should be.
A step that was applauded by the divisional officer for Limbe 1 Subdivision, Innocent Moni Nanje.
To the parents, we say kudos and we thank them for braving the odds to let their children come here. They have accompanied me. The first thing we noticed was enough security from the elements of forces of law and order. They are there to give assurance to the children, to the population, and to the environment that the state is still standing tall.
Despite the threat, the 2022 government common entrance examinations in both grammar and technical took place hitch-free in the seaside resort city of Limbe.
Now in news out of the Republic of Cameroon, we begin with a wrap-up of news on the African continent. The president of Guinea-Bissau, Umaru Sissoko Embalo, has dissolved the country's parliament. He says early parliamentary elections will be held this year to resolve a long-running political crisis. Tensions between parliament and the presidency have gripped the West African state for months today, and the tensions are yet to be dissolved in that country. An attempt by one of Libya's rival prime minister to seat his government in the capital Tripoli triggered clashes between competing military or militias today, and the clashes forced the newly appointed prime minister to leave the city. The office of the prime minister said that Fathi Bashaga said he had arrived in Tripoli with a number of cabinet cabinet ministers earlier today, 3 months after his appointment to lead the interim government. Now in France, the new French Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne has immediately come under pressure from environmentalists on the left, and they warned that hopes were low that she would drastically cut the carbon emissions of France or move fast enough to address global heating. During election campaign, President Emmanuel Macron promised to make France a world leader on the climate emergency. In Prime Minister Borne's first comments after taking office, she promised to act faster and stronger to deal with climate challenges. Now take a listen to the new French Prime Minister in this extract.
Retirement reform is necessary to make our system more universal, equitable and sustainable. For this reason, we must work a bit longer in the years ahead.
And that's it for the first part of this newscast. Talking Point is up next. Thank you for joining us in Talking Points. Today we're going to be discussing the fight against terrorism in the Sahel region and the rest of the African continent, with the withdrawal of Mali from the group of 5 Sahel countries and the multinational force fighting terrorists in that part of West Africa. And our guest today is Andrin Atem. He is a Pan-Africanist and political analyst. Andrin, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Babila.
Right, Mali decides to withdraw from the multinational force fighting terrorists in the Sahel region of the African continent on grounds that it is being exploited by some unnamed foreign powers. What's your take about this?
The decision about Mali is a very strategic decision, because you cannot have a double standard where at the same time you are fighting against imperialism, you are pursuing the right to self-determination, and you are trying to rebuild Mali for Malians and give Malians the right to pursue their own future in their own country. And the G5 Sahel zones are all organizations that are built by the West to protect not only their interests, but to also promote a fight against Africans among themselves, and they are not there to actually fight against the jihadists or to actually bring stability in those two regions. Do not forget that the jihadists or the Islamic extremists are those that are fighting against a system which seems to be destroying our cultures and our tradition, our values and our identities. And these are the very struggles that these jihadists are carrying out, and one of their main campaigns to eradicate democracy in Africa. So the aspect of the G5 region is to actually fight a fight in Africa which is not in the interest of the Africans, but is to protect the interest of the imperialists and the colonialists in Africa, which is not going to serve the people in the G5 region. Mali has taken a stand to make sure that Mali is not a democratic nation. As a matter of fact, the leader we have today in Mali was not democratically elected. The leader we have today in Mali did not come from a political party. This came from the will and the desire of the masses. Now we remember that the Malian government has been under serious sanctions from the ECOWAS to the AU only because of the stand of Assimi Goïta, where we have the masses that are standing behind an individual declaring their position that this is the way they want to go and decide in which system of governance is going to be best for the people of Mali. But we realize that they have been putting pressure on Mali to go back into what they call a civilian government, which has never been in the interest of the Malian people. We remember as well that the Mali people have suffered under a democratic government for 25 good years, and their experience with the last regime of Abubakar Keïta was a very horrendous experience, which has never been in the advantage of the people. Right now, the Malians have been able to regroup themselves together, come together, set aside their differences. The things which set them apart, they have been able to put it aside in order to come together to pursue a common goal of their sovereignty. This is very important for us to understand that the Sahel region is endowed with a lot of natural resources. mineral, both natural and human. And the interest of France and the West in the G5 region is to continue maintain instability in order to permit them to build their military base and allow the AFRICOM, which is the U.S. Army, which is in joint coalition with the African forces in building peace in Africa. We have over 39 military bases of the AFRICOM in Africa, which are led by the Americans. We have 19 military bases of the French troops in all their 14 colonies. Ever since the AU in 2002, we have only had the uprisings of terrorism in Africa. As a matter of fact, as long as the West has been pushing forward the agenda in building democracy in Africa, which has never been in the advantage of the masses of the African people, we have only witnessed the increase of insecurity, because the democratic governments that we have been having in Africa are those that only seek the interest of the minority against the majority. In other words, the system of democracy in Africa today does not allow the masses in order to have access to what they have in order to develop their own lives in their own nations. So this is a struggle in which we are facing today in Africa, that insecurity today in Africa has only been promoted by the democratic government. Permit me this to explain this very well, because we have come to realize that democracy is a legalized coup in Africa, where the majority is always nominated from a minority party. As a matter of fact, you cannot tell me, for example, in the population of Chad, let's say of Central Africa, for example, let's say we have a population of 5 million, and then you have 15 political parties where the majority in a period of election is 2 million. So are they now telling us that 2 million has now become the majority of 7 million? Are you telling us that a president who is voted from a political party is going to lead a population of a people who did not vote him? So this is what we are saying, that democracy has not come here to seek the advantage or the interest of the African people, but it is to promote colonialism and imperialism in Africa, where...
All right, Andrine, what's your analysis of the claim by Mali that it is being, or the country is being exploited by some unnamed foreign powers, as highlighted by the military junta in that country, particularly in the fight against jihadis within the multinational force put in place by the 5 Sahel countries? How is it being exploited in that fight by unnamed or an unnamed foreign power?
That is a very good question, Mr. Babila, and this is what I'm trying to explain here, that the G5 is set up by the Western powers with the intention to fight against Islamic jihadist terrorist movements in the Sahel region and in Africa. So what I'm trying to explain here is that the fight against the G5 struggle to fight against the Islamic jihadist extremists in Africa are Africans. That simply means that we are having a war of Africans fighting against Africans for the interest of the West and not the interest of the African people. The African problem should be solved by African solutions. We should not have organizations or the G5, which was actually promoted and sponsored by the West in the name of fighting against Islamic extremists, who are fighting against the democratic system which is brought into Africa by the West. Now this simply means that the West is using the G5 in order to maintain their agenda in Africa, in order to fight Africans that are against a system which is not working. Now we also understand that Mali has, in the period of which is an ongoing event right now, that Mali has been asking France to move out from Mali and allow Malians to be able to manage themselves. Now you cannot have again the same Mali being part again of the G5, where France is a major player of the G5 Sahel region. It doesn't add up. So if Mali is going to break away from France, that simply means that Mali needs to break away from every other body which does not seek the interest of their sovereignty. And this is exactly why the Malian is withdrawing their troops away from the G5, because the G5 was set up, as a matter of fact, in 2014, was actually officialized in 2017 by the West in Africa in the name of fighting against jihadists. Mr. Babila, let us be very frank and honest. these extremists or these jihadists or whatever we may call them, Boko Haram or all of that, these terminologies are all built by the West in order to paint Africans against Africans, to fight against themselves, to protect whose interest? Africans or the Malians should go into what I call the all-inclusive dialogue. The G5 zone should go into what I call the all-inclusive dialogue, because the real enemies of Africa are not the Islamic extremists. Don't get me wrong, they are not the Islamic extremists. The real enemies in Africa are the multinationals who are building structures and systems which do not seek the interest of the African people. As a matter of fact, the war in the G5 region is a war that is being fought by Africans on the behalf of the West, not on the behalf of the Africans. That was the same thing we realized in Chad in the days of Idriss Déby. He was again actually fighting against Africans.
Now, what are the possible consequences of the withdrawal of Mali from the G5 Sahel on the fight against terrorism? Will it not weaken the force, the multinational force put in place to fight against terrorism or jihadists?
That's again another good question. You see, let us be very frank and honest, Mr. Babila. We don't need to fight ourselves under the notion of terrorism. What are these terrorists fighting against? We have seen terrorist movement all over Africa, including in the country where we are. We know what we are talking about. These are Africans who got problem with the systems which denies or do not seek the interest or the common interest of the goodness of the African people who reside in these various parts of Africa. So if Mali is going to back up, we understand that Mali is already facing sanctions. But one of the good news is that right now the world is in turmoil, and as a matter of fact, the Europeans are also facing their own crisis over there. So Mali backing out of the G5 region at this junction is very vital for its sovereignty. It is true that it's going to weaken the colonial structure or the colonial power as far as the G5 region is concerned. As a matter of fact, the G5 should be dissolved. They should not have these 5 nations coming together in the name of fighting Africans who are protesting for justice, who are protesting to protect the sovereignty of their motherland. This is not the kind of war we should be fighting in Africa. As a matter of fact, Africa at this junction should not. I keep asking myself, Mr. Babila, what exactly are we fighting in Africa? Africa is still underdeveloped. Africa is at war. We are undergoing a process in which we should not be dealing or entertaining suggestions from the West, but we should be learning to unite ourselves, build our own system so that we can be able to manage our own selves. As a matter of fact, you cannot have the G5, which is all sponsored by the West. As a matter of fact, whose interest are you keeping? Let the West manage the West and let Africa manage Africa. As a matter of fact, we don't.
So Adrien, are you suggesting that the fight against terrorism should be abandoned and the terrorists or the jihadis allowed to go ahead with their own agendas?
That's a very important question. Mr. Babila, this is my answer to you. As long as we have democracy in Africa, which is the major terror risk in Africa or terrorism in Africa, and the virus which is far dangerous than the pandemic, until Africans get rid of democracy in Africa, Africa will never unite. As a matter of fact, if Mali, what I'm actually saying here is that we are not promoting terrorism. But what I'm trying to say here is that what has been promoting terrorism in Africa is because of the presence and the structure of the multinationals. So we are not saying that Mali should abandon it. What they should rather do is that we should get into an all-inclusive dialogue. We see the same situation happening in Cameroon. We should get into an all-inclusive dialogue. Let us not put in our minds the names and the demonic, diabolic names that have been given by the West against our own people, when we understand the condition of our people, because we know our people don't get enough, and we understand the condition that many of Africans, 85% of Africans living below poverty rate is normal. Wherever there is poverty, there will be crime, there will be resistance, there will be people who will be breaking the law, there will be this kind of extremist secessionist movement. It is because of poverty, and this poverty is created in Africa because of the West, who are looting out of Africa, protecting their interests, building military base, to protect their interest in the name of jihadists. We also understand that France sponsors jihadist movement in Africa. We also understand that France sponsors terrorist movements in Africa. We also understand that France sponsors separatist movement in Africa in order to destabilize governments which are running away from their own system, which they have been able to understand that this does not work for their people.
In the case of the Lake Chad Basin, recently some inhabitants of Turu in the Marichanak Division Far North region of Cameroon marched to the governor's office complaining that they have been abandoned at the mercy of Boko Haram terrorists and that they were no longer living in their homes because they couldn't sleep in their homes anymore because of recurrent attacks by terrorists, and they were forced to sleep on mountain tops, on trees, and so on. And with the rainy season, the whole situation quite complicated there. What do you think about this? Even though the governor of the Far North region, Wijia Obakari, made some promises of combined bombardment of the terrorists from Nigeria and from Cameroon, this is yet to be clearly seen on the ground, or the impact of these promises are yet to be felt by the people.
Mr. Babila, my points are very simple. I do not understand the role of the AFRIC Command in Africa, which are already in over 29 African countries. These are military forces in Africa. The AU has an army, as a matter of fact. France has its own armies in Africa. These insecurities that we are all citing today, Mr. Babila, I think that this is another distortion and distraction, as a matter of fact, which the West has been using lately in Africa to destabilize government. To be honest, all those democratic governments and leaders that are still struggling to protect and to defend democracy in Africa will not sleep or will not have a rest in the hands of these terrorists, because their major concern, this is very important for us to understand, what is the root and the motivation of this secessionist movement or this jihadist movement, is because democracy, ever since the 60s, Africa has been heavily abused and heavily destroyed because of this association that Africa today is getting into the globalization with the West. We know, for example, that the case in the Congo, the basin, it is nothing different with what is happening in different parts of Africa. We know Africa today. You can take the case of Nigeria and explain what is happening in Ghana. As long as Africa today has embraced democracy, until it has a center of democracy, it will only give birth to more secessionist movement, terrorist movement. We need to get rid of this system, which is not working for us. As a matter of fact, we cannot continue to get leaders that are being manufactured by weapons, by factories of the West, which becomes weapons against our own people. How do you explain the fact that we have leaders in Africa who are unable to take decisions? Not because they do not have the goodwill for their people, but because there is a system in which is controlling their own leadership. And this is disturbing the African people. So to me, the solution to whether what is happening in the Congo Basin, to what is happening in Mali, to what is happening in Cameroon and all these other African countries, Africans need to get into what I call an all-inclusive dialogue. We have always had problems in Africa where leaders do not communicate with those that are leading. We have problems of communication between the leaders and the masses. The masses do not, as a matter of fact, have any connection with the leader. And people who go to vote.
Andrew Atem, Pan-Africanist and political analyst, thank you so much for your time and for those insights. And that's it for today's edition of the 6 p.m. primetime newscast on Equinoxe Television. Thank you so much for your time. In less than half an hour, Serge Alonto and his guest will be in your homes with Equinoxe Soir. Stay with us.
Equinoxe Télévision, au-delà de l'image, nous rendons compte.